Bonjour fiends, and a very warm welcome back to The Library is Haunted. So I hope you brought your cursed library card. You could tell I didn't know where I was going there, didn't you? But you get the gist of the Halloweenification, if you will, of the traditional welcome. Yes, I hope you're well. Welcome back to part 2, technically 3, possibly 2, I'm not sure, of a mini-series in which I go full out horror in my reading. If you haven't caught up with this series yet, you absolutely can. Just jump on my channel and look for all the videos titled The Library is Haunted, including my introduction video, which I set out the TBR that I'm reading over the month of October, and also last week's, well, I suppose that really depends on when you're watching this, last week's, in which I looked at books featuring contemporary versions of the vampire legend. Now, you may recall that this week my category is a word I completely made up. In fact, I didn't. It's 2 words that I've mashed together to make a sort of chimera, if you will. Can you have a chimera with only 2 things? I don't know, but let's decide for the sake of argument that you can, and so I have. And I was calling it Thri-ror. I'm not overly proud of that, but it's just what tripped off the tongues. It's a combination of horror and thriller. I could have also gone for Horr-iller, but I didn't. So if you prefer to think of it as Horr-iller rather than Thri-ror, actually Thri-ror is a lot harder to say, but oh well, the die is cast. Then, but yeah, by all means do. So this was an interesting one. This was a sort of almost, do forgive me rubbing my eyes, a little genre, a subgenre, if you will, that I sort of made up, but I think is still a thing, where it's the kind of standard thriller, but with a supernatural or horror twist to it. I mean, it's kind of what it says on the tin, really, isn't it? And for this, I decided to read, if you remember me saying, Nos for R2 by Joe Hill, which is billed as a terrifying new thriller, but I was drawn in by the fact that on the back it mentions sort of supernatural, horrifying elements. And also the Sunday Times said it was enthrallingly petrifying and creepily engrossing, which sounds to me like watching the Daily Politics. So there you go. But it was a chunkster, so I'd only set myself this 1 book for this particular week of the challenge. However, I will just say this. I did end up going into Waterstones and picking up, just because it was out and I wanted it. And then I tried to think of a way that I could work it into this series of vlogs. But I picked up A Sliver of Darkness by C.J. Tudor, which is short stories by the author of The Chalk Man and the one I featured on my channel before, which is off the top of my head. Right, well, that's annoying, isn't it? Because they've not given me the list. I think it was The Burning Girls, I think. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, this is 11 Twisted Tales of the Macabre. So I decided to read this one as well as part of this theme, because C.J. Tudor I would sort of put in the kind of thriller, kind of mystery thriller genre. So I thought I can justify it that way. But first things first. Also on that, the reason I also picked that up was A, to get myself a break from this, not in a bad way because I loved it, but you know, it was quite intense, but also because it went by a lot quicker than I expected, because this was 600 and nearly 700 pages, but it was actually a real page turner. So, you know, again, didn't take as long as I thought. So this is interesting. Just quick little recap of the plot of this one. So this is about a young woman called Victoria McQueen, who she discovers that she has this gift for finding things. Using her bike, she can transport herself or teleport, whatever, across this bridge that just appears out of nowhere and helps her locate things that are lost. Which is all good. Like, she finds things like her mum's bracelet and so on and so forth. But then she discovers she's not the only person who is able to do that. There's also a dangerous guy, it's an understatement, called Charlie Manx, who can do the same thing with his 1938 Rolls-Royce Wraith. and his vanity number plate is Nosferatu, hence the title. And basically he kidnaps children, only he doesn't call it that. He calls it saving them from their parents, who he claims are all, you know, bad news and stuff. And he tells them he's taking them to Christmas Land, which is, as the name suggests, a place where it's always Christmas. However, what we soon discover is that this has a profoundly bad effect on the children, who become less than human. So they become fascinated by violence, and they're like washed out, full of like big prongy teeth, and so on and so forth. Anyway, one day these two kind of worlds collide, and Victoria becomes the only person ever to escape from Manx. And years and years and years later, you find this out quite early, by the way, so I'm not doing any spoilers here. When she's, you know, been suffering mental health and addiction and so on and so forth, she's had a child, and then Manx sets his sights on her child. So, you know, it's all systems go to try and, you know, put an end to him once and for all. So this was really, really good, actually. I do need to say outright that there are, like, every content warning in the book needs to be applied to this book, because there's everything from sexual assault to self-harm, to gruesome scenes, to violence, to blood and guts and gore and all that business, to inappropriate relationships, language, everything, absolutely everything you can imagine a content warning for should be applied to this book. Now, I really, really liked it in spite of that, because it felt quite visceral and quite, if I can describe it, as a little bit unruly. Like, you never know where it was going to go next, and nothing was taken as sort of being too far in this kind of horrific hellscape. Which is not to say that there aren't tender moments and lovely, lovely relationships in this book. I found Victoria's relationship with Lou, who ends up being the father of her child, quite beautiful, actually. It was a gorgeous little partnership. There are some, I do need to flag as well, there are some incidences of discussions about fat, and potentially could be read as fat phobia. I don't think it is in this context, but just to be aware of as well. Their relationship is lovely, and also there is a relationship that Victoria has with another person who is able to dip into these worlds that she and Manx can dip into, called Maggie, who's a librarian. Who uses, I won't spoil this, but it's fun, a different kind of device to sort of, you know, tap into that power. Which, and I thought their relationship was really, really interesting as well. It's very seat of your pants. It's very sort of, I'm always a little bit skeptical, you know, when reviews and stuff say, oh my God, you'll be turning the pages all night. Not because I don't think those books exist, but I do think they are few and far between. But this really, really gripped me. And I really, really wanted to know what was going to happen next. I sort of had at the back of my mind that it would all work out, but, you know, otherwise there probably would have been a sequel, wouldn't there? She added cynically. But no, yeah, no, I thought it was exceptionally well plotted, particularly for such a big chunkster. So it's clearly someone who knows what they're doing, which in a way, I don't know if this makes me a snob or not, but like the way it's kind of presented and sold, I don't know if it does, it's doing it a little bit of a disservice in a way by making it look kind of, can I say it? It looks a bit like an airport thriller, doesn't it? But I actually think it's much better. Not that airport thrillers aren't good, but I mean in terms of generally a quality to the writing. So I will admit that at the very start, the first couple of chapters, I was worried because I really wasn't feeling it at all. I was like, ugh, this is going to be a struggle. And struggle on for you I would, my lovely library users. But once I got past about, I don't know, 40 pages, something like that, and they stopped referring to Victoria, the main character, has the brat. That's her father's nickname for her. Once it got a little bit more personal, I was in there. Maybe that's something about me as a reader. Maybe I really need that kind of personal connection with the book, or the characters, to really care. Do you know how you have those books that are quite distancing? I think I've talked about this at book club before now, where you're reading and you're invested in the story, but you're not really invested in the characters. And it's not even necessarily a specific thing that the author's done. It just pans out that way. So, but yeah, this brought it back on track. I think the world building is really, really interesting. I love the concept of being able to create geographies that affect the world based on what's in your head, because essentially the roads that these people are traveling are based on their thoughts. So it's like they're referred to as inscapes in the book, so they're not like highways and byways, they're inscapes that actually do lead somewhere. I don't want to spoil all the inner workings of how that kind of goes, but yeah, I really found that interesting because it was fleshed out. That's why it didn't feel cheap. It felt thought through, and really kind of, I mean, I don't know the science, the physics, whatever, metaphysics of this, but it felt, if not plausible in the real world necessarily, not implausible either, which I hope makes sense. The kind of drawing of the settings is beautifully done as well. Like Christmas Land in particular, which we eventually get to glimpse, is absolutely horrific. But genius because of it, and I thought that was really interesting. I think what Joe Hill does is managed to look at how things that are so innocent and bring such pleasure are usually the things that are most easily corrupted as well and made into horrifying versions of themselves. So yeah, I thought this was excellent. If you're looking for a real kind of horror thrill ride, I would absolutely recommend checking this out, on the proviso, again, that you do bear in mind that it doesn't play nice, if I can say that. It's edgy, it's visceral, it's unapologetically gruesome in several ways. So as long as you bear that in mind, I think you'll have a good time with this, if it's for you. If it's not, don't bother. But you know what I mean. That's true of every book. And then just briefly, I want to touch on the collection I picked up from CJ Tudor, which I really enjoyed. Now, I go back and forth on short stories, as you know. I've mentioned this on the channel before, and sometimes I think there's some absolutely genius ones. One of my personal favourites is Penelope Lively and A Pack of Cards, I think the collection's called. And there's a particular story called The Darkness Out There, which is one of my favourite short stories of all time. I just think it's beautiful. There's some really good, interesting ones in here. Very sting in the tail. So I would say twists more to the macabre horror quality than it does the thriller. But I'm still going to include it, as I said earlier, because CJ Tudor, I would primarily say, is a thriller writer, mystery writer. So just to give you kind of a rough overview. So there's one called End of the Liner, which is set in an apocalyptic world where everyone has to live on boats, and when they get too old, they are retired, i.e. thrown to the sea gods in the sea. I thought that one was all right. The Block, which is one of my favourites. It's horrible, really, about this tower block in Nottingham, where there's something inside. I can't be more specific than that, but it's gruesomely and very well drawn out. Runaway Blues, I wasn't as keen on that one, I'll be honest. That was about a blues singer and his missus, and there was a twist in the tale, but I wasn't overly massively keen. The Completion is just straight up fun, set in the horrific world of estate agents. Lion at the Gate, yeah, it was all right. It was fine, it was interesting, sort of dealing with the horror of urban environments and things like that. I've just gone through all of them here, haven't I? I didn't mean to. Gloria, which one was that? Oh yeah, Gloria, which is a kind of mini-sode in a tale from a character that was featured in the Chalkman, I believe, but I haven't read the Chalkman, so... But it was still good. It was less horror, more sort of moral ambiguity. So too with I'm Not Ted, which is a really, really short one that sort of... That's more of a Tales of the Unexpected, if you will. Final Course was... Isn't it funny how you remember some things? And oh, Final Course I really, really liked, which was, again, set in an apocalyptic UK, where the darkness has fallen over the planet, and a young dad and his daughter are seeking refuge with his old university friends. That's a good twist on that one. They've all got twists, by the way, so this is not a kind of spoiler, if you are interested. The copy shop was just a cheeky fun one. Apparently CJ Tudor wrote this for a magazine. She used to write for like women's magazines, whatever that means, like short fiction, you know. Dust was hang on, which one was this? Oh yeah, this was interesting. Dust set on a sort of island, not an island really, a holiday paradise sort of thing, with a kind of creeping sense of something being wrong. It was all right. And Butterfly Island, the last one, which I believe CJ Tudor said she might develop into a story later, was again a post-apocalyptic thing, but with a secret island that may or may not be as deserted as it appears. Some animal or insect horror in there as well. So kind of a mixed bag, but none of them were awful. You know, some of them just really, really grabbed me. As I say, my standouts were definitely Final Course and The Block. Possibly The Lion at the Gate for the ideas. I quite like that. Some of them are just like fun horror cheeky, you know what I mean, where it's sort of a bit like, and then some are actually really quite scary in the way that they raise a lot of moral questions as well, which in many ways may in fact be the bigger horror. Is it the things that go bump in the night, or is it the things that are walking beside you in plain sight? Who can say? But I had a good time with it, and they all go by very, very quickly. So CJ Tudor is very obviously a master or a mistress, or a gender neutral term for that, of the kind of form, for which we can only applaud. So there we go. That's this week's creepy little update. I must say, I'm really enjoying this opportunity to read some like horror-y, creepy stuff. It's not really my go-to per se. I'm more of a sort of fantasy with elements of horror thing, as evidenced by my love of Buffy. But no, I'm really, really liking this. I don't know if it'll be a fundamental change in my reading per se, but for now, it's a real pleasure to indulge in it. I forgot to show my candle earlier. This is actually gingerbread, which my friend bought me. And I don't suppose gingerbread is particularly Halloween-y, but, you know, you work with what you've got. And it is sort of browny orange, so we'll just go with it, shall we? But for now, put away those creepy library cards, my darlings, and make sure they're not covered in slime. Next episode, I will be back looking at some fiction featuring ghosts from the past. So keep your ears out for that, and your eyes for that matter. In the meantime, leave me a comment below. Let me know what you're reading on this chilling season, and if any of those two that I've mentioned sound good to you. Alright, my darlings, the library is now closed, but please do take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next episode. Mwah!